that very day, the first day of the week, two of Jesus' disciples were going to a village 7 miles from Jerusalem called Emmaus, and they were conversing about all the things that had occurred. And it happened that while they were conversing and debating, Jesus himself drew near and walked with them, but their eyes were prevented from recognizing him. He asked them, "What are you discussing as you walk along?" They stopped. Looking downcast, one of them, named Cleopas, said to him in reply, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know of the things that have taken place there in these days?" And he replied to him, "What sort of things?" They said to him, "The things that happened to Jesus the Nazarene, who was a prophet mighty in deed and word before God and all the people. How our chief priests and rulers both handed him over to a sentence of death and crucified him. But we were hoping that he would be the one to redeem Israel. And besides all this, it is now the third day since this took place. Some women from our group, however, have astounded us. They were at the tomb early in the morning and did not find his body. They came back and reported that they had indeed seen a vision of angels who announced that he was alive. Then some of those who with us went to the tomb and found things just as the woman had described, but they did not see." And he said to them, "Oh, how foolish you are! How slow of heart to believe all that the prophets spoke! Was it not necessary that the Christ would suffer these things and enter into his glory?" Then, beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them what referred to him in all the scriptures. As they approached the village to which they were going, he gave the impression that he was going on farther. But they urged him, "Stay with us, for it is nearly evening and the day is almost over." So he went in to stay with them, and it happened that while he was with them at the table, he took bread, said the blessing, broke it, and gave it to them. With that their eyes were open and they recognized him, but he vanished from their sight. Then they said to each other, "Were not our hearts burning within us while he spoke to us on the way and opened the scriptures to us?" So they set out at once and returned to Jerusalem, where they found gathered together the 11 and those with them who were saying, "The Lord has truly been raised and has appeared to Simon." Then the two recounted what had taken place on the way and how he was made known to them in the breaking of the bread. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. We have an image of Jesus. Surely it is inevitable. We have to have an image of God. When our image of God does not correspond to reality, then we are disappointed. For example, if we have an image of God that he is someone to turn to solve our problems, when he does not solve our problems, then we get disappointed, not of God, but in the false image of God that we have made for ourselves. Not because God is not capable of solving problems. God is capable of doing miracles. However, if you have an image of God, which is of someone who is for that, in reality, you're having a false image of God. You're having the image of God who is your servant, who is your employee, or still worse, that he is your slave, who is there to obey you and is there to serve you. Many have this image of God. Many crises of faith are due to having false images of God. They don't adore or don't believe in the true God, in the God of Jesus Christ. They believe in a God that they have made for themselves, as the Israelites made for themselves that golden calf on the way to the promised land in Sinai. Actually, this crisis of faith is not a crisis of faith in the true God, because they never knew or believed in the true God, but in the cast iron idol that they have made for themselves. This happens, and I believe that this It is the one of the deepest causes of why the crisis of faith in our time. What God have they turned away from? What God have they transmitted to you in your family or in catechesis? What God is it that you no longer need, no longer satisfies you, no longer tells you anything, and no longer adds anything to you? A God that is not the authentic one. They have never met the true God. Have you been disappointed in a God who loves you? Have you been disappointed in a God who has died for you? Or have you been disappointed in a God that was essentially your employee, your servant, your slave, and who, since he no longer gives you what you want, you fire him, just as you fire a bad employee? Why this introduction to today's gospel? Because this is the first thing these two disciples, not apostles, disciples of the large group that followed Jesus, one of them appears here and never appears again. Cleopas, these two disciples also had a false image of God and of Jesus. They say it. They tell a stranger whom they don't recognize, and they tell him. I am going to read the text again because it is very significant. They say, when Jesus, the mysterious companion, asks what has happened in Jerusalem, they answer, about Jesus the Nazarene, who was a powerful prophet in works and words. Prophet, not God, but a prophet. Powerful man in works and words. He taught well, but above all, in works, because he multiplied the loaves and fishes. He raised the dead, made the paralyzed walk. God the servant, God the employee, God who serves you. In this case, they had what they wanted Jesus to serve them for, who did not recognize as God. How did they deliver him to the high priests and our chiefs to sentence him to death and crucify him? Here it comes. We expected he was going to free Israel, but with all of this, we are already in the third day since this happened. We expected that he was going to lead to free Israel. They had an image of Jesus, in this case, as a revolutionary military political leader. This was their image of Jesus. This was their image of God. Since his image did not correspond to reality, they did not say, I was wrong, but rather, he has deceived me. Jesus never deceived. Jesus never said anything that could make one think that he was a revolutionary political leader, a bloody military man. He never said that. He spoke of loving the enemy, turning the other cheek. It didn't matter what Christ said. It didn't matter what Christ taught. They had their image of Jesus, and that image didn't change reality, but their image imposed itself on reality. When reality showed that their image was wrong, that reality no longer interested them, and they left. I think we should all make a conscience examination, absolutely everyone, about what our image of God is. Because if one day we have a crisis of faith, or if one of our people has a crisis of faith, possibly they are not having a true crisis of faith, but simply has not had faith or has not had faith in Jesus Christ. He has believed in another God, in another type of God. Especially in this case, it was the military God, the warrior God, but in our time, above all, the servant God, the employee God, the slave God, the God who is there to satisfy your desires. You're not at God's service, but God has to be at your service, because you, not only man, humanity, but you are at the center of the universe. You are the sun, and everything has to rotate like planets around you. You are the center. What is not useful to you, you throw it out. It no longer tells me anything. It no longer serves me. It no longer adds anything to me. It is a lesson that we must not forget. Of course, it is not the only one in this important text, which tells us of this appearance of the risen Christ. Our Lord is going to appear twice. The text says so, as he has promised. There are two real presences of Christ shown in the text from St. Luke. First, Jesus in the midst of the disciples. He said, Matthew 18:20, "Where 2 or 3 are united in my name, I am present in their midst." This phrase, "in their midst," is repeated over and over in the appearances of the risen man. Jesus appeared in their midst while the doors were closed out of fear of the Jews. In the midst of the community, Christ has not come to make an individualistic religion. God and me and God. The others don't matter to me. He has come to found a church, a community religion, an assembly, a group of disciples united in His name, by Him, but united. Unity is an essential characteristic of the church, and in fact, when we define the notes of the church, we say that it is one. Unity is fundamental in the church, and only unity allows the presence of the Lord in the midst of the disciples. Where there is unity, there is love, because if there is no love, there is no unity. Where there is unity and reciprocal love, not only I who love, I who struggle, I who make a sacrifice, but the other responds to his measure, but responds with love to the love that I give. The Lord is present there. These two had lost their faith, a faith that had never really had, because they had believed in another type of Jesus, but they were friends. They were still at the moment united in the name of Christ. The Lord appears there. You can have the Lord in your house. You're not a priest. You're a layman. You cannot have the Lord in the Eucharist in your house. But you can have the Lord present in your midst with your family. 2 spouses, a grandmother and a grandson, 2 friends at work. The presence of the Lord in the midst of the disciples is, today the text says is later, what warms our hearts. It says it explicitly. We felt our hearts burning. Being with the Lord in the midst of ours gives us the same sensation that those who also had when Jesus was alive. We are touching God. God is touching us. He is touching our hearts. Naturally, there is a price to pay, the price of unity. That is, the price of reciprocal love. For example, this price implies forgiveness. This price implies starting over. It implies being aware of the other and not living dependent only on yourself, making the other live for you. It implies love as Christ has taught us. Another presence of the Lord, the Eucharist. The Eucharist, in which this case, it is explained as the breaking and the blessing of the bread. Thanksgiving is a real presence of Christ. However, just as the other presence, where 2 or more are united in my name, and that is valid for anyone who are united in His name, in this one it is the Lord who consecrates. The Lord is who blesses. They will only be able to do it in the name of the Lord, those whom He has appointed. Those apostles whom He on Holy Thursday night said to them, "Do this in remembrance of me." Let us thank God. Let us thank God because He wants to stay among us and as our comfort and our strength. Let us give thanks to God and don't make ourselves a God in our image and likeness, but rather try to be the ones who resemble God. So be it.